Okay, so I want to quickly talk about probabilistic uncertainty and then we will continue this in the next class. So, probabilistic uncertainty is when I not only know what are my future states of action, but I also know some probabilities associated with it, right. So, now we can come back to Pratyush's point. If I give you probability with each state of nature, what criterion can you use? Expected reward. So, now you can take the expectation and create an expected reward, or so you will have to maximize the expected reward, or you can minimize the expected regret. You will minimize the expected regret. The good news is that for this setting, one step decision making problems, minimizing expected regret is same as maximizing expected reward, and you can check that for this particular problem. I am going to associate expected reward of an action with the letter Q. Okay. So, Q of an action will be reward of first outcome times probability of first outcome plus reward of second outcome times probability of second outcome, and so on and so forth. And so, let us say a priori I did not know much. So, I only said that favorable and unfavorable markets happen with probability 0.5 each. Then for large plant it will be 10,000 expected value. Some people call it expected value, some people call it expected reward, some people call it expected monetary value. Okay. It is the same thing in our case. For small plant it would be 40,000 and for no plant it will be 0, and then I will pick the maximum on the expected reward and that will be 40,000, which is small plant. Now, everybody with me, this is easy stuff, right, but I want to spend even one more minute on this and make sure that you also look at this visual way of thinking about this, because when problems become harder, this visual way will be your guide, and I am saying this with all my experience. This is you at the top, you are a circle because you have to choose an action. When you have to choose an action, it will be a circle, you are in control. And what are the actions? Large plant, small plant and no plant, and they will be arrows. But once you make an action, multiple things can happen which are not in your control, and that would be a square. And in this case, two things can happen, favorable or unfavorable, and you also know the probabilities, they happen with probability 0.5. So, you make this graph and then you say, okay, when large plant happens and favorable market happens, I make 200. When large plant happens and unfavorable market happens, I make minus 180k, and so on and so forth. I list the rewards and then I back them up. You can think of them as expectimax, if you remember expectimax. And so, I will first compute the expected value, and that will go in the circular node or the square node. It will first go in the square node, I will back it up. Okay. So, for the first square node it will be 10k, for the second square node 40k and 0, and then in the circular node I am going to take the max, and that will be 40k, and my answer would be build a small plant. Now, this seems obvious to you, but you shall see how this would become more and more interesting as problems become harder and harder. So, now I am going to leave you with a question today which I will answer in the next class, and the question is as follows. Let us suppose that somebody comes to Foxphone company, let us say this is an economist who does market surveys, and this economist says that I will analyze the economy for you. I will go into the villages, figure out how many people can pay your cheaper smartphones. I will go into the urban areas, I will figure out how many people might be okay with cheaper smartphones, and so on and so forth, and I will do this survey for you, and I will tell you whether the market is going to be favorable or unfavorable. You say, wow, that is great. But the question you have to answer is, how much should you be willing to pay this economist for this information? So, I want to make sure everybody understands the question. Okay? The question is, Foxphone company could hire an economist to analyze the economy in order to more accurately determine which economic condition will occur in the future, whether it will be a favorable market or it will be an unfavorable market. And for now, let us say that this economist tells me the truth. When the economist says it is favorable, then it is definitely favorable. When the economist says it is unfavorable, then it is definitely unfavorable. Okay? So, the economist gives me perfect information, and the question I am asking is, what is the expected value of perfect information? In other words, in this setting, how much, what is the maximum you should be willing to pay the economist? Suppose an economist comes to you, or a market researcher comes to you, or an MBA comes to you and says, you know, don't decide on the large small plant or no plant right away. Give me a little bit of time, I will go do the survey, I will go into the villages, I will go into the urban centers, and I will come back and tell you what is the market for what is the market for indigenous smartphones. Is it favorable or is it unfavorable? And the question then I have to answer. So, I will say, okay, how much would you charge for such an information? And the economist will say, okay, I want to charge you C rupees. The question I have is, should I hire this economist or not? Right? How much is the maximum C I should be willing to pay for this information? And this is what is called the value of information, often denoted as VOI. Some people also call it value of perfect information, VPI. If what the outcome is going to be perfect. So, if the economist says it is favorable, I am going to trust the economist so much that yes, I will believe the market is favorable and the market is favorable, and vice versa, then we will call it value of perfect information. But of course, in the general case, it might just change my probability distribution, right, and we have to deal with it somehow. So, the question we have to answer is, how valuable is this information in money terms? And how do we even go about analyzing this? So, a few people have thought about it, I am very happy about it. The person at the far end, yes, what is your name? Shivam, yes.
Yeah, so if we don't have the economics, then we don't know about the favorable or unfavorable environment. So, we are going to make decisions from that we know.
Right. So, the first thing that he says, which is right, is that let us suppose we do not have this additional information, then this is our tree. We do not know whether the market is going to be favorable or not, and we will be making our decision based on this tree, and therefore, in expectation we stand to gain 40k. Good. This is what we would have if we did not have this additional information. So, now the question is, if we had this information, how would you think about? Somebody else? There was another hand from there. Yes, what is your name? Yes, yes.
Think of this, if we have the information, we will take out the rate and what it will take. If I was thinking of another approach, we will take out.
So, if we have this information, we have to compute the result with this additional information. Okay? And it is easiest to think about it pictorially, and I will re-emphasize the importance of this pictorial graph, because this graph really helps you streamline your computations. If you make this graph, there is a good chance you are not going to make a mistake. This graph has to be made chronologically. So, what is the first thing I would do? I would say, hello economist, go and do the survey. What is the second thing that is going to happen? The economist does their survey and comes back with an answer, and then what do I do? Based on their answer, I decide my best action of plant, no plant, or small plant, or whatever. This is the chronology. This is important. So, my first step is to ask. It is to say, hello, go, do the survey, come back with the answer. Now, what answers can it come back with? Favorable or not favorable? Are they in my control? They are not in my control. I mean, they are in nobody else's control. The economist goes and does their search and then comes up with the answer. But a priori, I do not know which answer they will come back with, and I have to deal with both of them because it is not in my control. So, it is an OR node or an AND node? It is a circular node or a square node? It is a square node, also called an AND node, and these kinds of graphs are called AND OR graphs. Okay. Typical graphs are OR graphs, these kinds of graphs are called AND OR graphs. Okay. So, therefore, you can see that there is a square node and I have two. Now, why are the other two nodes circular nodes? Because based on their outcome, I am going to make a choice, I am going to make a decision. It is now in my control what I do based on their result. Okay. So, this is how I am building this graph. So, the first thing I am going to do is I am going to compute what is called expected value with perfect information. With perfect information means that if I knew what is the perfect information, what am I going to do? But I do not know what is the perfect information going to be. So, I will have to take expectation over the various information I will get, right. So, it is the expected or average return if we have perfect information before a decision is made. So, intuitively, if I tell you that the market is favorable, what are you going to do? Large plant. If I tell you the market is unfavorable, what are you going to do? No plant. Now, notice that this decision is going to happen after I get this information. This is where we have roles flipped. Earlier, I was making this decision and I did not know the outcome of favorable or unfavorable. Now, I know the perfect information, it is either favorable or not favorable, and I am going to then make a decision afterwards, right. So, therefore, if the market is favorable, I stand to gain 200k, if the market is unfavorable, I stand to gain 0. And pictorially what is going to happen is, if the economist tells me market is favorable, I will still have to make a decision between these three. And if the economist says market is unfavorable, I will still have to make a decision between these three, but now I can take a different decision because these are two different nodes. One is under the condition that the economist said favorable, one is under the condition economist said not. And so, the value of the favorable edge, the favorable node is 200k and the value of the not favorable node is 0. However, I am making all this computation today. I have not even asked the economist yet. Today I do not know what is the economist going to say. Is the economist going to say favorable or not going to say not favorable? So, I can't make a decision based on 200 or 0. I have to take an expectation with whatever probability distribution I have at my disposal right now. And the probability distribution is a favorable market might be returned 50% of the time, an unfavorable market might be returned 50% of the time. So, this is value with perfect information when the information is favorable 200, value with perfect information when the information is not favorable 0, but expected value with perfect information happens when this information is not available to us, and that would be calculated by choosing the best action for each outcome and multiplying its reward times the probability of occurrence, which would therefore be 100k. And if you look at it in the graph, basically we are saying is that favorable could happen with probability 0.5, unfavorable could happen with probability 0.5, and therefore, my expected value with perfect information, and expectation always happens at this square node, right. In this case, it would be 100k. So far so good, but my question still has not been answered. My question was, how much should I be willing to pay this economist for this information? Somebody who hasn't spoken, now it should become more or less clear to you. Let us say, what is the max I should be willing to pay the economist? Somebody who hasn't spoken. Yes, yes, the person in the orange shirt. What's the name? Path. Yes. 60,000. And why 60,000? The best we can get is 100,000 with the economist in the loop. And if we do not have this information, we get 40K that we computed last in the last version. So, therefore, we will be silly to give more than 60K to the economist for this information, because that means that we will end up losing more money by taking that action. So, this is exactly right. Expected value with perfect information is expected value with perfect information minus the expected value without information, and this equation sort of stays forever. And in terms of the graph, what is happening is that I can also not ask the economist, that is my other possible edge. And I know that if that happens, I will make expected value of 40K. And let us say economist charges C. So, at my OR node, I have to do max of two numbers, one is 100K minus C, where C is what economist charges, and the other is 40K. And of course, the left edge is picked if 100K minus C is greater than or equal to 40K, and that means C is less than or equal to 60K. Okay. So, expected value of perfect information is 60,000 in this case. It is the maximum amount that Foxconn India company should pay to purchase perfect information from a source such as economist. But of course, in practice you may not really pay 60,000, because perfect information is rare. You do not know exactly what is going to happen. In fact, after they come up with the information, we may build the plant, and they may, suddenly Jio will come in the middle, and if that happens, then the whole probability distribution changes, right. I have a company which was doing really well. It is a startup company which was doing amazingly well before Jio came into the market, and then suddenly they have become sidelined, because whatever things they were planning to do and they were proposing to do, Jio does it for free, more or less. If you are an Airtel today, at least I do not know if you guys have been using mobile phones for the last 4 or 5 years, or you are too young that you only started using when Jio came into the market, but there was a time when mobile phones were, the plans were expensive. I have been on Airtel for a very long time, and then suddenly Jio came into the market, and then the next few months I suddenly find Airtel prices to get slashed. This is what happens when somebody is giving a lot of subsidy, everybody else has to somehow float, and they cut their profits, but made sure that the customers do not go away, right. And other companies started merging, right, Idea and Vodafone and BSNL and all these. There are many such companies. There were more, now they are being merging. I do not remember who all have merged technically. So, to summarize, many other things can happen, and so you in practice will not give the absolute maximum amount, but this calculation allows you to figure out what is the absolute maximum that you should be paying the economist.